Good afternoon, collectors and friends. Welcome to Trading Card Therapy, episode number 59. I'm your host, the Doctor, Leighton Sheldon. Thanks for tuning in today. Really excited about the episode that we're about to get into because I'm specifically going to be talking about a collection that we just purchased, and in particular, the material is so interesting because it is from the 19th century. Yes, that's right. We recently had the good fortune to buy a nice 5-figure plus collection from the late 1800s that includes 36, that's right, 3 dozen graded old judges, a few other cards from that time period. And if you are listening to today's episode, of course, I'll talk about the cards. But if you want to see them, make sure you hop over to our Just Collect YouTube channel as we put all of our Trading Card Therapy episodes on there with the video. So you'll be able to see some of the amazing cards from this collection. And if you want to see the full story behind the collection and every card in it, make sure you check out our blog on our website at blog.justcollect.com. So this individual reached out to our website. They filled out the free appraisal form. And, when you get the information, you get these old judges. At first, you're not exactly sure, maybe, because he didn't give us the list, the entire graded list. He just had some old judges and maybe the reprints. But then as we started the dialogue through email, quickly realized he knew exactly what he had. The cards were graded. And as far as the amount of Hall of Famers and the content, of course, you always want it to be only Hall of Famers and only, the top tier stars. But, old judges, even just commons, are worth quite a bit of money as far as, even if they're low grade, they can still be hundreds of dollars each. So we were excited to get the list and have it comprise of anything from that time period. So when we got the list, we saw it was about 3 dozen old judges, the N172s as they're affectionately known as. We wanted to make sure that we acted quickly. One of the issues was, if you know anything about the old judge market, they're not that easy to find, and because they don't trade often, not that easy to value. So what we typically do here at Just Collect, if we get approached with a collection to both evaluate and potentially to make an offer, we will let the individual or those folks know when we provide the information that we're now going to give you a range. So in other words, we're going to give you a low, we're going to give you a high, and we're also going to let you know that we're doing our best to value these, but the data is very limited. And in particular, for old judges, there's so many different variations. Maybe some of them don't trade as frequently as, let's say, a Mickey Mantle card from the 50s does. And in particular with old judges, as we explained to this individual, the image itself is, in some cases, almost more important than the actual grade of the card. Because these cards being black and white, you can imagine that if the image is, crystal clear versus if you have a nice grade, but the image is a little bit blurry, I would rather have a lower grade card technically with old judges and make sure that I had cards with incredible clarity. That's what I would tend to focus on. There were a few other surprises in this collection. We're not going to show off every card today, but we are going to show off a handful of the most important cards from the collection. But before we get to that, I wanted to explain to you a little bit more about the process. So because these cards are not traded as often as, some other decades of cards, or even T206s, which, are still 100 plus years old, those cards are more abundant in quantity, as well as they trade more frequently, meaning they're bought and sold more frequently, and so the data is just more plentiful. So with this particular collection, we had to be careful, which is why we gave a range for each card. And of course, the Hall of Famers just trade a little bit more often than some of the commons do. So, we had to take all that into account. And I think for me, as much as I wanted to buy the collection, I really didn't have a ton of confidence that we would get it because there's not a ton of data. And I felt like, hey, if someone, put their hard work into acquiring, 3 dozen or so just old judges, they might even have a better idea of the current market than I do. But nonetheless, we did handle this collection like we handle many other collections that we don't necessarily want to value each card from the start. So what we did was we took about a half dozen cards. I think we took 4 Hall of Famers and a couple commons. We let this individual know what we thought they were worth, what we could pay for it. And then and only then, if we reach some sort of understanding, not an agreement, but just an understanding that we were at least close enough, then and only then, would we pursue valuing the rest of the collection. In this case, because they were graded, we didn't necessarily need to have them in person. We didn't need extensive images of every card, but we did, of course, want images of the Hall of Famers and of the higher grade cards, in this particular group. So we talked about the first half dozen cards or so, and we were able to reach, some sort of tentative understanding. Wouldn't call it an agreement, but understanding. And you're going to see with one of the cards, we kind of had like this range where, it was $1,000 swing. And we'll talk about that card's value in particular. We just did the best we could to both value it, to be transparent, let them know, like, hey, we get it. We may not reach a deal on these cards, but make no mistake. We'd like to buy them. We'd love to blog about it. We'd love to do a video about it. But we have to be careful as far as, trying to forget about making money, just making sure we don't lose. Even breaking even or just making a little bit on this would be certainly okay because of the subject matter. So we're going to show off today. It looks to be about 15 cards. It does include a number of the Hall of Famers in the collection. What I also did is I took some of the other cards that weren't old judges but were from the late 1800s to show them off. And they're not necessarily in order of, worst to best. In this case, we're leading off with probably one of the best cards in the collection, and we're just going to run with it like this. So once again, if you are listening on Spotify, if you are listening on Apple or any other place where you enjoy your podcast, but just the audio component, this might be the episode where you decide to check us out on our Just Collect YouTube channel. So that way you can visibly see some of the highlights of the collection. And just as a reminder, if you are not into YouTube, but you're more of, hey, like, let me just check out the website. Well, that's what you should do. In this case, in the next few weeks, we will come out with a full story. We'll, of course, put the video behind the collection, and there'll be a number of images on our website on this story, which you'll be able to find at blog.justcollect.com. And if you're a baseball card nerd and aficionado like myself, you'll appreciate the blog because we talk about and have told the story about hundreds and hundreds of collections that we've had the good fortune to not only encounter, but actually purchase over the last 25 years. So, without further ado, we are going to start to show off some of the highlights of this incredible 19th century collection. Here we go. First up, and one of my favorite cards in the group, definitely one of the most valuable. He is not in the T206 set. Here is a King Kelly, old judge, N172, bat at ready, right-handed, fairly nice image, fairly good condition, even though it's a 3. I don't see any, terribly gross flaws. And yeah, there might be a crease there in the back, but nothing is really disturbing the image of the card. It's possible to maybe be a little bit more clear, but I do like this card. Of course, it's one of my favorites in the collection and happens to be one of the most expensive. So no, I won't be keeping it for my collection. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with it yet. But for now, we're just going to bask in the fact that we were able to purchase it, enjoy it, and are able to share it with you today right here on Trading Card Therapy. So this is one of the cards in the collection. There was a pretty big disparity. I believe the low and the high column for the range of the value we had between $5,000 and $6,000. Now, of course, it is possible it sells for more than $6,000 at auction, but nothing's guaranteed. And so you'll see where we use the range of not just this card, but the other cards in the collection to try to successfully negotiate the purchase of this wonderful 19th century collection. Next up, once again, we're going to cover the Hall of Famers first from the old judges. Now, this is not an easy card to find. It's Clark Griffith. It's graded a 3, but this to me is a very obvious example that you cannot go just based off the numeric grade on the old judge set. Because if you check out right here, look at that stark difference just in clarity between the King Kelly and the Clark Griffith. That's also graded 3. And the image is very light, faint, if you will. So even though it's my card, I wouldn't recommend this card to someone to buy as like a type card as an old judge, because you're not getting the beauty of the set. But if you're working on a Clark Griffith run, if you're working on a Clark Griffith, meaning not just type run for old judges, but a Clark Griffith player run, or if you're a old judge completist and you're trying to work on the set and get every Hall of Famer, I could see, you know what? There's no other Clark Griffith available from the set. I'll grab it. Personally, this is one of the ones I was disappointed about in the collection, but we did make a deal for everything, so I wasn't going to give that one back. All right, next up is a Tim Keefe. This one is also graded 3, but as you can see as I get into focus, just a lot nicer than the Clark Griffith. Look at that time period uniform, very cool. Blank backed. And even though a little bit of surface wear, no, intrusive creasing or anything really gross. So it's just a really, a great looking 3. And for a card from 1889, so do the math with me. How much? Very old. Now, joking aside, what is it, 135 years old? That's incredible. This isn't in the museum. We get to hold this. I'm very happy to be a professional baseball card treasure hunter, and this is what I do. Thanks for putting up with that for just a minute. All right. Also a very cool card, but once again, don't love the image. However, beggars can't be choosers when you're talking about buying cards that are over 100 years old. This is Buck Ewing with a mascot. You can see that the image is just okay, and Ewing's name is a little bit blurry here, of New York. Buck Ewing has several cards in the Old Judge N172 set. This is just one of the many iconic pieces of baseball history, and that's really what this is here. It's not just a card. It's a piece of baseball history. These teams, these players, the way that they dressed, the way they acted, this all laid the groundwork for your beloved New York Yankees, for your beloved Arizona Diamondbacks, for your beloved New York Mets, whoever you love and follow. Without these guys and without these gangs, I'm not sure baseball is going to exist the way it does today. All right, this is an interesting one. This is incredible for not just the grade, but look at that clarity. So it's Nat Hudson, of the St. Louis Browns, affectionately known as one of the 13 Browns champions from the Old Judge set. These are well-known and desirable in the Old Judge set for 2 key reasons. One, it depicts the 1886 St. Louis Browns, who were the world champions. And of course, no one can deny the aesthetics and the beauty of these cards. They just happen to be gorgeous-looking cards, little pieces of baseball history, capturing a game that's been around for, at this point, well over 100 years. And this example, other than that little spot of surface wear on the back, just has a wonderful look to it. Let me know in the comments if you agree, if you appreciate a card like this, even though you may not know who Nat Hudson is. But let me tell you who he played with. He played with Charles Comiskey. Charles Comiskey was the Pete Rose before Pete Rose. He not only managed the club, Charles Comiskey also played on it. He was one of the 13 St. Louis Brown champions. Also one of my favorite cards in the collection. There were a few St. Louis Brown champions cards. This by far was the best looking one and the highest graded. The last 3 Old Judges I'm going to show you out of the 3 dozen or so in the collection, I'm not showing you because of the grade or even the player. I'm showing you because of the card itself and the clarity. First up is John Roach of New York. I just really appreciate the clarity. And if you haven't figured out by now, each and every one of these poses you're seeing is exactly that. That's right. The old Judge cards that you see and the players that are depicted on them, they're all posing for these photographs. Can you imagine? This is well before Topps and Bubblegum, and even really 20 years before T206s. Can you imagine players are posing? I mean, baseball isn't even well developed then. Let me know in the comments, what do you think were going through the players' minds at that time? I'm just going to throw it out there. Even if they got paid a nickel or a ham sandwich or a knish, maybe that's all it took. They're like, sure, I'll pose. You're going to pay me? They're probably laughing. Well, we're very happy they did. Well over 100 years later, this is one of my favorite cards in the collection. Looks like he's got that bottleneck style, like, Heine Grow bat. I dig it. Let me know if you do. You can see a little bit of surface wear there, but thankfully it's limited to the back. All right, here's Mr. B Squared Bill Blair. I just liked the not only depiction of the player itself, but check out that background. I mean, I don't know where he's standing, but very detailed. So that, once again, is Bill Blair of the Athletics. I just thought that was cool. And, of course, he's not holding a glove or a bat, but I believe he's appearing to make like he's going to throw a ball. All right, last one of the old Judges I'm going to show off. This happens to be one of the highest graded. Not the reason I'm showing it off. I found it fascinating. Tommy O'Rourke is not holding a glove. He's holding two hands out like he's trying to feel the ball. I'm thinking, but there were gloves in the 1889 game of baseball. Let me know in the comments. Why do you think he's doing this? Do you think it was just the photographer saying, Tommy, no glove for you. Like, no suit for you. No glove for you today. We're showing him you're a man. You can feel the ball with just your hands. I don't know. Anyway, nice looking card. Let's show you some of the other special cards in this collection. And once again, if you want to see the whole kit and caboodle, the whole story, the full video, go to our blog. It'll be out in a couple of weeks, blog.justcollect.com. You will not regret it because there's hundreds of stories about fantastic collections that we bought all around the country and the world. All right, here are a pair of N300 Mayo Cut Club cards in the collection. Mr. Cross and Jimmy Bannon. Looks like a guy I went to high school with, came to high school every day with this kind of hair. I'm like, why don't you wear a hat, man? You can wear a hat. He didn't care. I don't think Jimmy Bannon cared either. Anyway, if you know anything about the N300 set, then you know it's one of the earliest. It's one of the best. And these cards just, they reek of like 19th century baseball. They are just oh so cool. So if you don't have one for your collection, there are several Hall of Famers in that collection, in that set, like Cap Anson, like Hugh Duffy. Grab yourself a common if you're budget conscious. They're still very cool. As my son would like to say, they slay. All right, very interesting. I'm going to show it off at the same time because they depict the same player just from different sets. So first, they're both of Bob Caruthers, very well-known pitcher of the time period, featured here on Brooklyn. Also, Mr. Caruthers right there in the N28 set. This is one of my favorite sets of all time. It doesn't just feature baseball players. It features jockeys, chess players, boxers, all sorts of interesting things going on in the 1888 Goodwin Champions N162 set. Even if you don't buy a card, do yourself a favor. Go to eBay and do a search. Some of the artwork is tremendous on these cards. And what's really interesting is Caruthers, I believe, was the last person to record 40 win seasons for his team in the American Association, if the information that was given to me is correct. He's not in the Hall of Famer. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Maybe he should be. He was a dominating pitcher of the time. Let me know in the chat which one you like better, the N162 or the N28. I am absolutely partial to the N162. And you can check out there some of the other types of sets or subsets within the set. As I said, there's also bicyclists, billiards, runners, boxers. I mentioned pedestrians. I mean, who's putting in pedestrians? Lawn tennis jockeys. It's awesome. All right. We're not going to show off all the cards, but we're showing off two of my favorite. There's only two of these in the collection. What's so interesting, before I show these two cards off, there is no known complete sets, or at least that I know of, or that many people in the hobby know of. Part of it is because no one exactly knows how many cards are in the complete set. There's rumored to be about 60 cards. These promoted Kalamazoo tobacco, and this absolutely is along the lines of what I was just talking about with the old judges. You can focus on the grades. Like this is a 3 of Fred Mann. It's not a bad image. It's actually quite nice, but I thought it could be a little bit more clear. However, the back features for 50 pictures. You could trade in this card for other prizes put out by the Chaz and Cross Company from Philly. Getting any cards with the advertising backs is not that easy to do in the Kalamazoo Bat set. These N690s are extremely rare. They always have been. Well, you are closing the video today with the one card I'm keeping from this collection. And it's not because Joseph Mulvey is famous or because he's great in SEC4, because this just to me reeks of 19th century baseball. Look at that thin and frail glove. Look at that top hat baseball cap. He's got the stash. I love it. I love how crystal clear it is. And I think most important, it is from an iconic set that maybe I wouldn't get to buy if I wasn't able to have the good fortune to come across this amazing collection. And so I hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Trading Card Therapy. It was a little bit different than usual, and that we usually cover several topics. But I thought, because this collection was so special, and it's not often that we get cards from the 1800s, and if we do, there's usually a couple of them in a bigger collection of getting cards from the 1900s. So to be able to get dozens of cards from the 1800s, I'm very grateful, feeling extremely appreciative about the collection, about acquiring it, and so I wanted to devote the entire episode to it. I hope you enjoyed it today. And even if you don't get to physically see the cards because you listen to the podcast, whether it be on Apple or Spotify, I encourage you highly to check out the full story. All the pictures and the video will be on our blog at blog.justcollect.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Trading Card Therapy episode number 59.